change is hard. I came to the conclusion some time ago, I am here because my ancestors were afraid of change. They did not step in front of the saber-toothed tiger. They watched and saw others get killed, so they realized, okay, that's not a good thing. So caution around change is a healthy way to start. The next step is digging into it. What am I afraid of? It's fear-based, and fear is what keeps us alive. I don't want to diminish that fear of change. But what we need to do as adult human beings is, okay, now I recognize I'm afraid of this, whether it's a homeless person or a multifamily. Now what am I going to do? And it's usually information. And if you give people information, hear them and hear what their concerns are and give them time, like tell me more and get into it, you can find out, is information going to be helpful? Like, oh, okay, I thought it was going to be a barracks. It's actually kind of cool farmhouses. I think maybe that might be okay. Or you'll find out that you're dealing with something deeper, whether it's prejudice or more complex things that aren't going to be fixed with more information.
Welcome to Housing Matters, the podcast that covers everything real estate, from buying your first home to building your investment portfolio. Hosted by me, Matt Pouliot, of Pouliot Real Estate. Each episode brings expert insights, smart strategies, and real talk on housing and affordability. If it's about real estate, it matters here. Today, I'm thrilled to have joining us Nancy Smith, who is the CEO of GrowSmart Maine. Nancy has lived and worked in Maine since 1981 and joined GrowSmart Maine in April of 2010. Nancy maintains the fiscal health of the organization while overseeing programming at the local level. She does statewide convenings and leads advocacy for smart growth outcomes at the state, local, and federal levels. Nancy, I'm really thrilled to have you joining us today.
It's great to be here, Matt. Thanks so much for the invitation.
For sure. So I always like to get started with folks sharing their personal journey. You've lived and worked in Maine for over 40 years, serving as a forester, a legislator like me at one point, a farmer, and now as an executive director of GrowSmart. Can you walk us through your journey and what led you to focus really on smart growth and community development?
Oh, that's fabulous. So I guess starting with, I went to school for forestry because I liked hiking. And I grew up in the suburbs of Hartford, Connecticut, and thought, well, I don't want that. So when you're 17 and you make these big decisions, and I went to the University of New Hampshire and got an associate degree because I was so eager to get out in the world. And, you know, when you're 17, I like hiking, therefore I should be a forester. So I got an associate degree. But I got a job in Lincoln, Maine, working for International Paper as a forest technician. And I was there for 13 years with International Paper. Roughly half of that was out in the woods. So I went from, again, the suburbs of Hartford to, I can still remember being in Glenwood, which is a township below Haynesville, of the famous Haynesville Woods story, and checking my map.
Wait a second. I don't know the Haynesville Woods story. Do you have a Cliff Notes version of it?
There's a tombstone every mile, and it's a trucker song. Tombstone every mile in the Haynesville Woods.
And this is in Maine?
It's just south of Holton. Yeah.
I never knew this.
2A. I hope I got all that right. Route 2A.
I'm going to have to go Google this after.
Should, if I were on my game, I'd know this, the guy who sang it, and I don't. But it was there that I probably got out my lunch, looked at my map and my compass, and realized I was 1 mile from the road. And International Paper owned the township. So I was 1 mile from the nearest person, whoever happened to drive by, and I found it really exciting and invigorating.
Interesting. You weren't nervous.
No, I felt very comfortable there. I've got stories. Weird things happen when you're in the woods. But so I started with that, and then I worked out of the Livermore Falls office, which was near the J Mill, still working in Woodlands. And for years, I got to manage the recreation program for 600,000 acres. How do we manage the hunting lodges, large commercial lodges? So that I thought was my career, and I went to work one day and my job had been eliminated. So I had time to think about what I wanted to do, and in that, my second marriage married a farmer, and decided farming made sense, and was part of the family farm for 17 years.
What kind of farming?
We started as dairy and then diversified, and we were doing dairy and pigs and chickens and turkeys and eggs. It was huge. It was too big. But we did this beautiful direct farmers market. We had a booth I was part of the farmers market booth for 10 years. I loved it. It was a really great way to raise our kids. In that time, I also served in the legislature. So I would go, clean out where the chickens were. I mainly dealt with the chickens, fed them, make sure everybody was set, and then go to legislature for the day.
Where were you living then?
That was in Monmouth.
Okay.
So things changed about the same time that marriage ended. Is when I was termed out of the legislature and where do I go next? What do I want to do? And this job opening at GrowSmart Maine came up. And, I give the board at the time a lot of credit. I didn't have CEO nonprofit experience, but they knew that smart growth still is perceived as an urban thing, and they wanted to connect with rural. And as you know, serving in the legislature is like getting a master's in public administration. You learn a lot. And the connections. And so I was hired, as you said, in April of 2010. I'm still there. I can see retirement off in the future, a year or two from now. It's been an amazing, I've said, no guidance counselor would ever say, well, here's a career path you might want to consider. But as I think most people find, if you're open to possibilities, then cool things happen.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times the legislature, for those who are fortunate to serve, it opens up your eyes to so many different facets of the things that are just everyday life for most folks. And it really, I think, helps you peer behind the curtain as to the way things kind of really work. And then once you see how the sausage is made, it's like, I got to do something about this. And it creates some opportunities to do things, really, that you might not have otherwise had.
Yeah.
I'm interested in learning a little bit more about, what is GrowSmart for those who don't know GrowSmart as an organization.
So GrowSmart Maine was founded in 2004, so we just had our 20th anniversary. And it began as a statewide organization focused on stopping sprawl. And the group back then realized pretty quickly, if you're against something, you only can go so far. You really need to be for something. And that's where smart growth came in. And smart growth is a set of principles. There are about 10 of them that if you follow them, it outlines how you can navigate change and manage growth in a way that accommodates what you want to see in your community, keeps what you care about in your community. And there's also a fiscal component too. How we grow matters, both for our own quality of life and for budgets, for the municipal budget and for household budget. So broadly, GrowSmart Maine helps communities navigate change in alignment with smart growth.
Okay.
And we are 6 people. We're 5 full-time equivalent. And we do advocacy. We do convenings. We have our summit every October. We do webinars. And then we also do community engagement, which might be hands-on right in the community, or we have resources on our website that communities can go to and learn about how to deal with the challenges and opportunities they're facing.
Yeah, because not every community has a comprehensive plan, right? And furthermore, maybe not every comprehensive plan is in line with smart growth principles. Is that accurate?
I want to say I haven't read them all, so I don't know. But yeah, it's ideally they are. That is the whole point of a municipal comprehensive plan, is truly to be comprehensive. Where do you want housing? Where do you not want development? Mm-hmm. And how do you manage all of that? And some are better than others. Some are older than others. And I know we'll get to talking about policy, but broadly, the changes that we've seen in the Maine legislature over the last 4 years have differentiated the rules for where there's a designated growth area, where the community has said we want growth, and where they've said we don't want growth. And so it's become even more important that towns have strategic growth areas. Say, this really is where we're willing to say, yes, come here and develop, and this is what we want to see.
And by growth, you mean development of mostly residential or commercial too?
Everything.
Yeah.
But it's thoughtful about what are the mixed uses that work together. in the United States, we got really good at segmenting both kinds of housing, but also housing separate from other things. And it makes sense not to have housing next to an industrial park. But when we've gotten to the point where we design housing where you have to get into your car to do anything from get a cup of coffee or a gallon of milk to go to the library or see your friends, then we've created a lot of problems that wouldn't be there if we're more thoughtful about where we encourage growth.
Yeah, that's true. I do think that a lot of America has been built out around the automobile. And I sometimes wonder what it would be like in terms of development patterns had Henry Ford never come on the scene, Obviously, we can't unwind that clock, and so much investment and time and effort's been made to prioritize, driving and parking spaces over humans.
It's a great way to put it. When we're prioritizing the car over the people, and when transportation systems are designed for fast cars and not for people moving safely in a bunch of different ways, then we've got problems. The other reference I love to point to people is people come to Maine not for the suburbs. People live in suburbs. It's part of life. They come because of our cool downtowns and our waterfront and our forests and our farms. And with our cool downtowns, a lot of our current ordinances would make them illegal. Could Water Street, whether it's in Augusta or in any of the other towns that have water streets and main streets, could they be built today the way that we all enjoy them now? And that's a lot of what we work with is looking at the regulations we've got for housing and seeing if they make sense for the different areas.
Yeah. How did your experience as a farmer and your decades as a forester shape the way that you think about land use and conservation?
These are such good questions. I guess it may surprise you or people who are listening that what comes to mind is the reminder I would make fairly regularly when I was a farmer, and it fed through to when I was earlier when I was a forester, is these are small businesses. And I push back when people talk about farms being quaint. It's like I broke a rib, I have arthritis, I have financial woes from being a farmer. These are small businesses we're trying to make. And it's the same in forestry. When I worked for International Paper, we were looking at profit and losses and ROI and how do you manage a forest for the long term when the financial thing to do is just clear cut everything. And you don't. You look at that balance of how do we make a living maintaining this land in a way that we can be proud of and that we can pass on to the next generation, but we also have the right to make a living here too.
It's interesting. Just a couple days ago, I was standing on the side of my driveway, and in the winter, I can see the Capitol Dome from my house.
Cool.
Of course, this time of year I can't, but we're in close proximity to the state capitol. And in the woods behind us, which is now protected as part of the Howard Hill Nature Preserve, it's part of the Kennebec Land Trust effort, 167 acres that will never be developed, and it's right in the backyard. It's great. When you look down in there, you see rows and rows of these rock walls, and it's pretty evident that all these trees are less than 70 years old, probably. And this was not woods at all at one time. It was all big fields, for pasture, livestock, or whatever. But in time, the need for that, I guess, eroded or changed, or the farmer who had the fields didn't use them anymore. I don't know what happened, but now it's grown in. And then it becomes a situation of, well, what is the right and proper use? I mean, obviously, this particular land will now be woods forever. That's wonderful. But in other areas, maybe woods grew in, but does it make sense to get rid of that woods to create something else like farming? Or how should one reconcile those things, I guess, is the question.
I would say for a municipality, that's the role of the comprehensive plan. For a landowner, I go back to the forestry days. There are two things you start with, and I think this is probably core to any land use. What are the landowner's goals, and what's the soil? We forget that everything in the foundation, it's a soil. How easy is it to put in a foundation? It's the same as what is the soil quality, what is this good at growing. There are tree species that grow better in boggy areas versus up in sandy. You'll find oak trees in very different places than you'll find black spruce. And same with growing crops. And the challenge for a community comes because the green fields that are great for growing crops are also really great for houses because it's so easy to put in a road and a foundation. And again, how do we evaluate what the priority should be for the municipality, knowing that landowner rights are legitimate and important as well. So
Yeah, in addition to these heritage industries that we have in Maine around forestry, fishing, it's somebody mentioned to me one time, they're like, can you imagine a world in which somebody came to the town of, let's just say Belfast, for instance, and you go visit Belfast and say that there's nothing in the water out front. It's Belfast and as the way it would have looked in the 1700s or something, but now. And they came with a proposal that they wanted to put buoys everywhere out in the water and drive around on a diesel-powered boat and, make a bunch of noise and everything. Like, that wouldn't get approved, but that's lobstering, know? And that's a heritage industry that, we protect. And so it's like, how do we balance those heritage industries with the need for growth and change, and also at the same time not being disruptive to the environment?
that's smart growth.
Yeah.
How do we thread that needle is exactly how do you figure out we want more housing, we need housing, we need industry, there are a lot of reasons to protect the heritage industries, and I loop tourism in that. I don't think tourism would exist if we didn't have the working waterfront farms and the forests. That's what draws people here. So I don't know. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think ultimately what you're saying is there needs to be a balance, and oftentimes developers go for the least common denominator on what might be easiest as opposed to what's best for all.
Yes, and that's their job. I really don't want, when people become familiar with GrowSmart Maine or with smart growth, they assume that we're anti-growth, and we're not. And developers are a really important part of making things happen. It's their job to make money doing the thing that they're doing. We want to encourage that. And that's where we have incentives like tax credits, and we have disincentives in tax policy so that it makes it workable for them to do what maybe isn't the easiest thing. If the easiest thing is to buy a hayfield from a farmer who can't figure out how to do it anymore, that's an option. But what if, and the ROI, the return on investment, may be higher on that because it's so easy and the land is less expensive the further you are from town. Okay, that could happen. What do we need to do to balance the scales if the community decides what we really want is there are these old houses in town or an old mill, and it's falling down, and it's part of, again, manufacturing is part of our heritage. When you look at Biddeford and Lewiston off the top of my head, where manufacturing mills have become mixed use, that doesn't happen by itself. That happens with developers, with the capital stack, with how do we finance it, and the community saying we want to make this happen, and we know that the developers can't do it on their own. So how do we invest in it?
Yeah, that's interesting, and it leads really well into the next topic that I wanted to talk with you about, which is revitalizing communities. I correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was GrowSmart that had the Maine Downtown Center program.
No, that's Maine Community Maine Development Foundation.
Okay, Maine Development Foundation
has the Maine Downtown Center. The Maine Downtown Center is a terrific partner.
Okay, yeah.
For the work that we do.
And there's a lot of efforts really focused on revitalizing. I know through your work, revitalizing downtowns and getting people to focus on the urban centers where there's access to transportation, maybe more walkable and so forth. But we have these historic neighborhoods that are challenging to redo because of things like egress, which wasn't a thing, 100 years ago, to get out of a building with 2 stairways instead of 1, or parking, challenges that really a lot of people don't need a car, but they think they need a car because the way we've built out the rest of the environment is toward that.
Right.
So what, I guess, kind of efforts are you leading in terms of helping people have the economic incentive or the support really toward being a part of revitalizing these communities, these historic neighborhoods and downtowns?
So, great question again. We have 3 threads of work: advocacy, community engagement, and the convenings. And we use all of those towards what you're talking about. That when a community identifies that it wants, I guess, there's the state roadmap on housing. We need so much housing, and they've divvied it up.
Right.
How do we get there? Some of the work that we've done is in advocacy for things like one of the bills that passed this year reduces the parking requirement that a municipality can attach to housing. There is an assumption that every dwelling unit, every apartment needs 2 cars. Well, what if that's not the case? To your point, what if a family with 2 drivers or 3 drivers can make do with 1 car?
Yeah.
And the problem is that parking spaces cost money, and they take up space that could be another dwelling unit.
Yeah.
So we've looked at that. We've looked at advocacy in other avenues. Speaker Fecto's LD 1829 did things like where municipalities require sprinklers, fire suppression sprinklers. That was a huge, very contentious issue. We had a bill that said if you've got, I think, an accessory dwelling unit and 1 or 2, like a duplex, so some number of dwelling units, a municipality can't require sprinklers. They are $30,000 to $40,000. You may have better numbers. They're not cheap.
Right.
That did not pass. There was great opposition because of the fear of, nobody wants to have a fatality in a fire. You have to balance that with people who are dying because they don't have a home, period. And a lot of reasons that things have changed and the need for that. What passed in LD 1829 is, I think the way it's phrased, and again, in and amongst all my papers, I have the details if we need it. If there's an accessory dwelling unit attached to either single or duplex, the town cannot require a sprinkler there. And we found, one of the things I'd love to touch on is NIMBYism and YIMBYism on people who want to bring things in and people who don't. But one piece that we see is when municipal regulations seem to be about one thing, but they really are just about raising the cost. And there were communities where it seemed clear that requiring a sprinkler is a way to stop accessory dwelling units to come in.
So this to me, and I'm curious your thoughts on this as a policymaker, for those listening, Nancy and I were of opposing parties, but of the same mind in terms of solving problems.
I love that description. Yeah.
And I think that oftentimes it gets lost on people the degree to which their kind of station is somewhat predetermined by rules that are created by government around property rights. And I've noticed this interesting situation occur in which Republicans oftentimes will come to the debate saying, we do not want to get in the way of local control. I touched on this a little bit earlier with our guest this morning. In Maine and in New England in large, we have, this very tight-knit kind of Commonwealth mindset, if you will, around local control and enshrining and protect. Everything the locals do is 100% right all the time. Don't ask any questions. That's how a lot of my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle would view it. And Democrats were bringing forward and have brought forward some really what I would consider to be forward-thinking proposals around land use. And when I was in the legislature, my caucus, particularly around the bill that we passed, LD 2003, which now has been called out nationally as a great piece of legislation to look toward to help with creating housing. To a T, they all said the same thing. We can't do this. This is usurping local control. And I'm like, wait a second, guys. The last time I checked, you didn't want government involved in people's lives, like at any level. Why is it all right to have it super involved in their, life around private property rights when they have something that's economically viable that they want to try to do? But this also brings, I think this is kind of interesting because, like, from your perspective, we also shouldn't let people just do anything that they want with their land because it could be detrimental to others. If it's like the best economic thing, doesn't mean it's best for the environment or in line with some good, sensible principles for growth. So I'm curious, like, how we get to a point, and I think that this is what you work on every day, that we can like find some more agreement where people don't feel like we're usurping local control, but instead it's kind of feeling like it's more organic, that it's coming from the local, the dovetailing of these better practices.
What came to mind first is when it comes to always deferring to home rule is, how's that working for you?
Right.
And it's not.
Yeah.
And I've even heard
Well,
conversations.
some would say it is because we don't want any change, right? And
remind me, let's loop back to change.
yeah.
I love it, when two ideas collide, it's like, oh, there's so much we could do here. But I've even heard conversations where maybe it's not as clear. It isn't like you can never go there, you can never challenge home rule. And some of the recent bills have challenged home rule. And I get the frustration. I don't know if I mentioned, but I serve on the city council in Ellsworth now.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm seeing it on that end too.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm enjoying living it and implementing it on the municipal level after being at the state level, both with work and in the legislature. So the balance comes down, in my opinion, to we live in a society. We choose to live where we are interdependent and where we have taxes to pay for mutual benefits, schools, roads, at the very basic, and always the tension about how much and from where. But within that comes personal property versus community rights. And that balance is always going to be a tension, and it should always be challenged. I finally last year read Lobster Coast by Colin Woodard, and he explains the distrust Mainers have for government the further it is from home. And it comes from, the King of England, and then it comes from Massachusetts, where people from, wealthy men from Massachusetts were making decisions. And that is in our DNA at this point. And that's where within New England, we have this home rule. Our counties don't do a lot versus other parts of the country. So I think recognizing it and acknowledging that's where it comes from. And it's funny, I say our DNA, my sister does genealogy, and even though I moved to Maine in 1981, I've got roots in Belfast and
cool.
Portland and Westbrook that go back 1800s, 1700s, and even late 1600s.
Wow.
So I can say I've got my DNA is here.
Yeah.
And it makes sense why it felt like
Right,
home
to come back. Yeah. What you said about that balance between the community and society, like private property rights, that's a big, I think, thing at the core, in my opinion, of the work that you do with GrowSmart, having served in the legislature. And part of me is of the mind of free market, let them do what they want, leave them alone, but then recognizing that in the long term, that's probably not the best for future generations or even for the limited resources that we have now. I've talked about it before, and I think GrowSmart's weighed in on things like this. Why make somebody have, 200 feet of road frontage with pavement when you could have 4 houses on that same 200 feet, which is more dense, yet you bring that to a town like, let's say, Camden, for instance, that only has town meeting style government, doesn't have a council. So you want to make any changes, you got to wait for these certain meetings and so forth. That's another thing that's kind of slows things down in Maine. And they're like, well, no, we're not really interested because we like it the way it is. And then you just kind of sit around for another year to take another crack at the apple, It's just by its nature designed to kind of protect the status quo, and oftentimes requires so much education to help people understand that, this is literally what's making housing not attainable because your density requirements that you have don't allow for more on the same amount of land.
And it goes back to what I had said earlier. For instance that you used, if it was Camden who didn't want to narrow their frontage from 200 feet, that means their beautiful downtown that draws people from everywhere would be illegal.
Right.
So, let's think of this and go back to it. And GrowSmart fully supports smaller lot sizes where it makes sense. So this is in growth areas. It's infill where you've got the infrastructure already. When we're laying more pipes for water sewer, when we're building more roads, somebody's going to have to pay for that and pay for the maintenance.
Right.
So it gets complicated in the rural areas. It doesn't make sense to have that much housing where, again, it's going to require the infrastructure, it's going to require school buses, it's another ambulance. Those are $500,000 now or more. I learned that on the council. A new firehouse is $4 million. So that all ties together. To your point, one of the community outreach programs that we're just starting is called Housing Forward Communities.
What's this?
And the key is to have those communications before there's a development being proposed. And this is where groups like GrowSmart Maine can come in and help both the community and the developer that have conversations about what is infill. And does that mean that there's never a tree in the downtown? No, it's a balance of some areas of infill, some green space, some parklets, all of that makes sense. Have those conversations, learn the terminology. If I were to say multifamily housing to you, or to a group of 40 people with no visuals. Some people are going to picture a duplex with a garden. Some are going to picture a barracks. And if what a developer is proposing is a series of duplexes and a quadplex, but the community is seeing a barracks, you've got a problem. And so this ability to have the conversations, have the visuals, is going to be really powerful. We're bringing forward at our summit and other places. It's a Legos game designed by one of our board members. Galen Weibly works in southern Maine, and actually tactile, let people play with how would you design a community.
Yeah.
Those kinds of exercises before there's a development being proposed.
Yeah.
Helps immensely with clarity between the community, the property owner, and the developer.
But this brings up something that you talked about earlier, I think, and we've talked about like design charrettes with Vanessa Farr on here. We've talked to different people. And like I'm developing a project right now on 63 acres of land, and it becomes very quickly an exercise in engineering and math, as opposed to like ideally what I would like to see there, because the area median income for Kennebec County is $62,000. So like just yesterday I had a wonderful conversation with this organization out of Massachusetts called Reframe Systems. They're trying to design these little micro factories that can make modular apartment buildings or homes, all the stuff that we talk about from an innovative housing creation standpoint.
Right.
I'm like, guys, we're not even like 1 minute into them telling me about their company. I'm like, how much is it per square foot? Like how much for a 1,000 square foot unit delivered to my job site to put on a foundation? And he's like, well, it's going to be about $400 a square foot. I'm like, well, let's talk about other things, because I can't afford. I can afford to buy from you, but my friends and neighbors and so forth can't, and I'm interested in helping them make housing attainable, which is really a math exercise based on what backs into that. So then you come forward with a proposal, like we're working on a manufactured housing community. One hasn't been permitted in Augusta in over 20 years. It's also not in a prescriptive zone. It's performance standards. So this is going to go a lot of different ways potentially to get to a solution. But what I'm getting at is, when you say the words manufactured housing community, or more colloquially known as a trailer park, if you will, which these won't even move, but we'll set that aside.
Right.
People just come out like with pitchforks, saying, luckily this hasn't happened to us, and knock on wood, hopefully it won't. But in large, there are these NIMBYs that come out and say, we don't want that. And it's like, well, what this is proposing is what people can afford in this area, not whatever you and your mind's eye would love to see, and then we do the math and it doesn't add up, so then nothing happens. And you said earlier, like to talk about NIMBYs and YIMBYs, and so, one of it is, how do you move people to being a YIMBY? It sounds like part of that is in the planning of the town and the comprehensive plan and so forth, but sometimes that could take like 5 or 10 years. And what do we do now to encourage people to just say yes instead of no? And then how do we make sure that once yes has been said, the thing pencils out and people can actually afford to buy it?
There's like an hour's worth of responses. This is such a good conversation. I guess the thoughts I had when you were talking is it goes back like my time as a farmer and a forester. I was running a small business and I needed to know if we could make it work. And it's the same for developers. And there is a natural tension between the developer and the community. So much of it comes from what people are seeing in their mind's eye when you use the words. And you're right. We have enough land in our space with our home in Ellsworth where we could put in an accessory dwelling unit, and I would love to be part of the solution for workforce housing. I can't afford what I think it would cost, and I'm beginning to look more into it. But when I talk with folks about a tiny house, which has this like adorable persona to it, and then I said we could also just put in a trailer, and it gets a very different response because of the visual image people have of probably trailers from decades, 50 years ago. And trailer parks have been Maine's affordable housing solution. I have
They've
been through
rural
some
America's
beautiful
housing
ones.
solution, really.
Yeah, when they're done well and when both the grounds and the homes are maintained, they're perfectly credible, affordable housing options. I love the evolution that's happened over maybe the last 5 years of ensuring that the tenants in trailer parks have an opportunity to purchase it when it comes up.
Yeah.
That's the home ownership dream transition for the people who have been living in a tenant situation, which is tenuous. So
It's interesting because we all rent land. You either rent the land vis-a-vis your landlord who pays property taxes, or you literally rent it in a rented land community, or you just own property and you pay property tax. It's all rent. You're never getting that
I
money
had this
back.
conversation with a friend yesterday. I said, no, it's not rent. You're getting value for your property
Some
taxes.
places you get more than others.
Well, and again, and those are legitimate conversations to have about, are you investing in your community or are you wasting money?
Yeah,
or are you neglecting
and
your
a lot of
community?
communities, like you're now in a service center for down East Maine, Ellsworth.
Yeah.
Augusta's a service center. Just earlier I had on a guest, Colin McGarr, who's a young Maine guy who's coming back and moving and shaking here. And, we were talking about this kind of issue of poverty and those who are unhoused, and why does it seem that there's such a draw to like Augusta, for instance, or Bangor or Lewis? It's because they're service centers. That's where the services are.
Yeah.
Yet we've kind of been lacking in putting the appropriate services in place to help people. And the fallout is we see folks going up and down the street, and most people are like, we don't want to see this. They're also not at the same meeting that night that's to solve the problem,
Right.
But, this is a challenge, a tension that we have, especially in urban areas where we're trying to get people to go with young families. We're trying, or even no family. We're trying to get people to feel safe there because we want them in these denser, more infill kind of setups.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in that. I mean, this building now houses probably 20 people at any given time when it was just completely dark after 5 p.m. for almost 100 years, And so that, to me, makes a ton of sense. But when someone's like, I don't feel safe, like, to me, that's a part of the solution too.
So what comes to mind when you say that is, it was a description I heard from a conference Smart Growth America hosted when they're talking about gentrification. And when we rehab the buildings and don't invest in the people who are currently living here, that's gentrification. So while Water Street, Augusta, which is where our office is deliberately because it's such an awesome place to be and it's living our mission, while people have invested in these buildings, you and others, is the problem that we have not been investing in the people who use the soup kitchen and use the services here, so that oftentimes their mental illness is playing out in the streets.
Yeah.
We can choose to invest only in the buildings, and those people are still here, and it's not okay. And the people who are concerned, I encourage folks to remember these are our neighbors. I have a brother with schizophrenia. He gets the care he needs. He's decided to take care of himself. He lives in an apartment. There were times where he was struggling. And so that kind of understanding that these are people who aren't getting the services they need. And yes, they can be scary and it can be dangerous, but let's invest in those people while we're investing in the buildings.
Yeah, because a lot of the work that your organization does is more than just where can things be put or can there be a sprinkler system or not, but taking
Right.
a more holistic view about how we're going to help people.
Yeah, if it's not about people, it's irrelevant. I don't want to live in an amusement park that looks like a quaint city.
Yeah.
When I go home to Connecticut, a couple of times I've been where they're not doing strip malls anymore. They're recreating things that look like our downtowns.
Oh,
and
really?
It's retail outlets. There's one I visited with my sister. It used to be a golf course, and now it's this. It kind of looks like a Western village, and it's all outlet stores. And it's like an out-of-body experience. Like I feel like I'm in a downtown, but I know I'm not. We've got the real thing, and we've got people who live here and deserve.
Yeah,
help.
I mean, we have a couple living in this building. They wouldn't be upset with me sharing that sold their 3,000 square foot Victorian home in the West Side historic neighborhood and moved into our largest apartment, which is 858 square feet, a 2-bedroom apartment. That's the biggest one we have. They're as small as about 315 for a little studio up there, efficiency. And they love it. You know, they're like, we don't have to shovel anymore. We don't have to deal with any issues. You guys keep up with things. They feel safe because we have secured entrances and whatnot, you know. But they've been living here the whole time that this building's been operational for about 5 years. So when someone who's unhoused is walking down the street or something's going on, they don't feel, I don't think, like as nervous about it or that it's going to be a problem as somebody who hasn't experienced living here and is just going with the image in their mind, like you talked about earlier, the barracks versus the duplex. You know, it's like, oh, it's scary because there's somebody around that's unhoused. That doesn't mean that they're a violent person.
No,
you know,
you can say hello.
Yeah.
I encourage you to say hello.
Yeah.
And yes, you need to also learn signs of danger because that's everywhere.
Yeah.
But you can say hello to a person who looks like they could probably use a little bit of help. And I think that would probably make their day. For them to feel seen is therapeutic.
I bet. Yeah.
And the more we can do with that, the better.
And being around and not out in Timbuktu, like you're more of a chance to be around, seeing people and able to help out and address the issue. I think there is more of a demand, if you will, toward people coming back into urban centers just naturally because of access to different services, quality of life, and so forth. If we can ensure that there is the same level of safety, I see a lot of, particularly among boomers who are interested in retiring into a downtown setting that's got the whole thing's taken care of by somebody else and they can just focus on lifestyle and living life.
Yeah. There's great potential. We just can't forget that there are other human beings living here too.
Yeah, it's true.
But you talked about them having lived here the whole time of the transition, which I would love to use to bring back to talk about change.
Yeah.
So, and we talk about NIMBYism as though, you know, those jerks. But change is hard. I came to the conclusion some time ago, I am here because my ancestors were afraid of change. They did not step in front of the saber-toothed tiger. They watched and saw others get killed, so they realized, okay, that's not a good thing. So caution around change is a healthy way to start. The next step is digging into it. What am I afraid of? It's fear-based, and fear is what keeps us alive. I don't want to diminish that fear of change. But what we need to do as adult human beings is, okay, now I recognize I'm afraid of this, whether it's a homeless person or a multifamily. Now what am I going to do? And it's usually information. And if you give people information, hear them and hear what their concerns are and give them time, like tell me more and get into it, you can find out, is information going to be helpful? Like, oh, okay, I thought it was going to be a barracks. It's actually kind of cool farmhouses. I think maybe that might be okay. Or you'll find out that you're dealing with something deeper, whether it's prejudice or more complex things that aren't going to be fixed with more information.
Well, people also make decisions based mostly on how it's going to impact them directly, as opposed to maybe what's better for the greater
Right.
good of all. And like right now, that Howard Hill behind my house, there's an effort which has already raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to put in an extension of the roadway up to a parking lot. Okay, and so the reason for this is to make the trails handicap accessible so that those who are, in a wheelchair or otherwise find it difficult for mobility reasons to be able to experience the view shed of the Capitol. And I don't know if you've been up there, but
it's beautiful.
Gorgeous. And
Yeah.
so we convened a meeting here at our office last week to try to help educate people, to your point of providing more information. And, I was pretty candid with the group, even as the host. I said, look, I'm not really crazy about cutting down more trees up there and putting in more roadway to a parking lot, However, it has to be balanced with what are the outcomes that could be positive for more people, which is accessibility. We're blessed to have a child who just started walking about a month ago. But what if we had a child who couldn't walk, or even not us personally, just a friend or somebody, right? Then it starts to bring it home a little bit more like, oh, well, I don't need a parking lot because I can get up there the way it is. It's like, well, what about the people who can't,
And what about you 30 years from now?
Well, true. Yeah.
Apparently we're all aging. I don't know how that happened, but yeah.
So my goal will be to still be able to hike up there 30 years from now, but we'll see how it goes. Touche. I think, it's fair to understand. I understand where people are coming from. Like, we don't want more traffic in the neighborhood and all this. And, like what I found is that oftentimes these things get created and then it gets a big, draw for a period of time, and then it kind of just falls off the radar in terms of interest among people. And it's not this huge draw. Or the multifamily that needs to be created to ensure that the housing units are actually attainable for what the area income is seems like it's going to be this boogie monster and flood the school with a bunch of kids that we can't afford to, all this stuff. And then very rarely does that actually come to fruition.
And what is your community if there aren't kids?
True.
I mean, there are communities that have said, we don't actually want families. We don't actually want the firefighters and the teachers.
Right.
They may not say that out loud into a microphone, but you'll hear it in the conversations. Like, then what is your community and what will it be? And who's going to give a damn about your community 20 years from now if there aren't kids who grew up there?
Yes, and also it gets back to what we talked about earlier, where the rules that are in place, that are enshrined, make it more difficult to do that. I mean, I don't want to keep talking about this community we're trying to do, but like, we're going to start with 55 plus, even though I really don't want to. I want to do all ages. But the way the codes are written and what's in place from the State Manufactured Housing Board, it's easier to get approved a 55 plus community, which is we need to get out of the ground and get something built because everybody needs housing. And if we wait around 2 years to try to get the all ages, we're losing out on serving people for a year if we just got started with this. Yet, I mean, I'm a real life example of someone that's uber frustrated with the way that the rules are. That's not uncommon for me, but and so sometimes I try to change them, and I did, like over 40 times with legislation that I passed as a state legislator. But I'm now living in the world of play by the rules that are created, and you can't just go submit a bill tomorrow to try to change something, And it's like frustrating. My partner and I have talked about this. I'm like, we've got to go down the road and do our first, $4, $5, $6 million worth of investment, whatever ends up being, on a segment of the population that definitely needs to be served. But what about the guy who's 39 that wants to buy there too?
And the one... And you're right. So it goes into what incentives are there in communities in order to have this kind of construction happen. And that's a piece of it. But also know that your financial strategy of let's start with what we can do now. Those people are already, for the most part, probably already living here. And when they move to your community, that 39-year-old
can buy their house.
Will have the house.
That's the whole.
It's
that's the whole
ripple
vision.
Effect.
Yeah, because we sit with people that are like, oh, I don't want the stairs and repairs anymore, but I don't know where I'm going to go. So we are trying to solve for that. And I appreciate you mentioning that because sometimes I lose sight of the ripple effect, which is important. And I think this is a good way to talk a little bit more about, and we'll probably wrap up with this and a little bit about looking ahead. head, but this designation of a housing forward community, is that what you called it?
The program is Housing Forward Communities
Okay.
to get people so that they are proactive about
So
and ready for housing.
recently, Sarah Sturdivant, who was a guest of this podcast in the very beginning, is participating in this innovation panel that's going on at the state. They had a meeting this week. I don't know if you're part of that or not.
It was on my calendar, but
Yeah,
didn't get
mine
there.
too. Didn't make it to the meeting. Luckily, I'm not on the committee for that one, so whether they don't miss me, they never miss me anyway. But so Sarah was like, there's this big contention between offsite construction builder and offsite developer and the city of Portland, because essentially they went down the road with this project, and then Portland's like trying to change the deck chairs. And my thought was, okay, Portland, I think, I could be wrong about this. They're not a minimum receiver. They receive a lot of state aid for school education, and I think revenue sharing too. But what about if we as a state said, hey, look, we come up with this metric of how you can be a housing forward community, and then say you get a 0.5% bump on your revenue sharing if you get the green light that you're housing forward. Because to me, there's no incentive from a municipality to play ball, really. I mean, if a lot of these projects involve TIFs, tax increment financing, so the community in time will see tax revenue,
Right.
but often they're trading out most or all of that on the front end to try to get these projects off the ground. Like the former Kmart Plaza, which hopefully will be developed, not in line with the beautiful plan that I saw from GrowSmart.
We tried. We offered an alternative.
It's better than
yeah.
it's better than a storage unit that almost went in there. And I am actually very enthusiastic that there's housing going in town, and a hotel and whatnot.
And we're still happy to offer guidance on that as it moves forward.
Yeah, and but that's going to have a huge TIF, like $16 million over time, right? So the city is behind it, I think, because we know we need the housing, not because we're going to be generating a lot of revenue from it. But Augusta's kind of taken a more bullish stance on housing creation because so many projects have gotten approved here, but then not built because of economic reasons. Right. And so they're very serious about that. But Maine has over 400, municipalities and fiefdoms, I'll call them in some cases, where they're not forward thinking about housing. And but what is their incentive to do it other than being nice, or being forward thinking?
Well, it's I like your idea. I want to follow up with you on that for sometime in the future.
You can steal it.
Well, I wrote it down, so that's the same thing.
You can steal it for free.
Where was I going? Another way to approach it is there are communities that are proactive, and the communities that are not are going to see housing, and then they're going to see the tax revenue come in. They're also going to see their kids and grandkids living in those places. Down east is losing young people.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest motivator.
Right.
Hey, Mr. Council person who lived in your house for the last 30 years and don't want to move, do you want your family to leave? Because realistically, economically, it's not viable for them here. And here's why. I almost feel like we could put together a one-pager, and I'm going to do this for our planning board meeting, to be like the cost of not approving this project is X.
So one of the webinars we just hosted is with Jim Tischler, who's out of Michigan, and then Kevin Sutherland, who's currently the town manager in Newcastle. They talk about the property tax implications of not doing it right.
Oh, could you share that with me?
I'll share the link with you. Absolutely.
Great, thanks.
It's,
and we'll put it in our bio write-up of
like
this too.
thinking about the linear feet of road that you're investing in and what you're getting for revenues, and here's how it happens. Here are the expenses. Here's the revenue, and where you can go with it.
Yeah, so. I mean, I'm not afraid of doing math in front of a planning board. I think some people don't want to talk about it or quote unquote show their cards. But this takes, we talk a lot about the municipalities and government and da-da-da-da. Just as equal, and I think as we wrap up, is the importance of the developer to take on the sensible, smart growth approach. I think of people like Kara Wilbur, for instance, who really lives out the ethos of smart growth and has many very successful projects. A lot of them would be challenging to pencil out without some form of government resources, just because of how expensive the environment is in Maine right now. But I think we can get there as more and more people adopt those approaches, you know.
And if I can add one piece to that,
Yeah.
you worked really hard in your last term on the pre-approved building types.
Right.
This year it passed and it is law.
Good.
So we are moving forward with the state creating a catalog of,
Yeah.
I think, 8 different categories, whether it's a duplex or, you know, retail space with apartment above. And then there will be a catalog at the state level of 5 to 10 in each of those. The towns can come in and say, you know what, in our growth area, we like these in these categories.
See?
And if a developer does it, they can say you get administrative permit approval because the public process has already happened.
Yeah,
and
I love
that's
it.
going to be a game changer.
Totally, yeah. I mean, if I knew for sure I could buy this piece of land and I could definitely put one of these 4 buildings on it, and then I just run the math on those 4 buildings and I run the math on the infrastructure and it adds up, I know I'm already approved, if you will, from the
Yeah.
planning board. I just give this to the banker and say, let's run the numbers on this and see how we
Right.
do it. And then you go to the planning board knowing that it's already a green stamp. And maybe this is where someone becomes a housing forward community, right? We've adopted as an area where you can put guaranteed sets of homes, right? And then now, as a result of us doing this work, we're getting extra money from revenue sharing, so there's an incentive to do it.
Yeah.
To me, like that then becomes the dialogue, oh, I'm a developer in Kansas City. I want to do a deal up in Maine. I'm going to just start looking for housing forward communities
Right.
because I already know that my barriers to entry are way lower with that green mark. Then I'm going to look for land within that. You know, maybe we use Maine's zoning atlas or
I
something
was
to
just
show
going to say Maine
these.
zoning atlas and the Maine redevelopment.
Yeah, and then so
land
someone
bank.
can sit on their desktop in Kansas City and they're a real live developer who has the training and the financial resources, but no interest in playing in Maine because we don't have tract developments coming up where they can just
Right.
buy a chunk of land and go to business. They got to hope and pray. Like I'm investing probably $100,000 just to go to the planning board. I mean, like, I hope they approve my project. You know, it's definitely a
Yeah.
gamble, but one that I'm willing to take because I feel bullish about where we're headed for housing creation.
And GrowSmart, one of our goals is encouraging the small developer, small scale compared to the national guys
Yeah.
who are invested in the community. We
Yeah.
see it on Water Street and with the work that you're doing and others across the state. Holton, there's a guy who I see that we need housing, I'm going to do this.
Well,
It's
because I
happening.
think it will turn more builders into developers because they're not
Yeah.
the same. And it will help democratize development and also bring with it certain principles and practices that are better for all of us.
In Western Avenue, Mastway, Matt.
Yeah,
I'm
Matt
losing-
Morrill.
Thank you. Another example of
Yeah.
he was a builder and now what he's done
Phenomenal.
in Hallowell and what he's doing here, phenomenal.
Yeah. So I want to wrap up. We've got a few minutes left with looking ahead. You have a big summit coming up in October.
We do.
And this will be, I think, airing before that or very close to it.
Okay, October 16th.
Yeah.
It is at the Waterville Opera House, our 3rd year there.
Cool.
We have Tony Pippa coming from Brookings, and it is the Rural Innovation Roadmap.
I love it.
How do we do all of these things in rural? And I may start it out by, like, we all have different definitions for rural, but it's basically most of Maine is rural. And how do we do that? And we have 2 women who are coming in speaking. One is the town manager in Machias, and the other runs it's called CES. It is an entrepreneurial program based out of Farmington for high school kids.
Oh, cool.
And they're going to talk about what they're doing for rural innovation. We're excited to be hosting. This has been our pattern for 7 or 8 years now of one national speaker. This is the first time we have 2 state level speakers. Then community spotlights. What are we seeing in the community? Lots of time for conversation instead of breakout sessions and forums. We're going to have our community members, 5 to 10, set up at pub tables with visuals
cool.
about what they're doing in conversation with people.
That's great.
And then city experience tours. When we all, I think, have been to conferences where you go into a windowless conference room, you don't even know what city you're in. And this is a chance for people. We'll have at least 3 different chances to walk around Waterville and see what this looks like.
That's awesome. And Waterville's a great community to do it in. Of course,
Yeah.
Colby has invested over $2 billion to.
I read that headline
But
this week.
it's interesting how it doesn't feel, at least to me, and I guess if I were growing up in Waterville, it might feel different. It doesn't necessarily feel gentrified. I mean, I just bought a building on Center Street, which is right around the corner from downtown. It's, 3 buildings that you would love this, totally would not be allowed to be built now.
Right.
We literally own the land that has 6 parking spots on it. 2 belong to the neighbor in the deed.
Okay.
and 4 belong to us, but we own the land, okay?
Okay.
It's like, so 2 cars wide, 3 cars deep, like for 6 units of apartments, okay? So it's a beautiful, like I felt very happy to be buying this building because I'm like, this is a smart growth building, but it was
is.
built 150 years ago.
Back when they did it out of necessity.
Because they
And
didn't
then
have
we
cars.
got sloppy.
People walked.
And now we're coming back. The other thing we'll have at the summit is Maine Smart Growth Awards, where we reward the projects like that,
Yeah.
plans, and people who are doing great stuff.
Cool,
so
that's
keep
exciting.
that in mind for
so
future
people
years.
who are listening that want to learn more about smart growth and GrowSmart Maine, where would they go?
GrowSmartMaine.org on the internet. That's where our website is. We're on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn.
Great.
Those are where we're most active in social media. And send us an email if you got ideas.
And one short thing on one takeaway that you would like people to take away from this conversation.
How long do I have to think about that? It's about building community, and it's about the people who are here and who want to be here. That's what this is all about.
Well, Pouliot Real Estate's tagline, selling homes, building community, I think that fits together really well.
That works.
Nancy, thank you. Always a fun to have a conversation
This
with
has
you
been
and
fabulous.
collaborate and get things done. And looking forward to the future of housing and more in Maine.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.